For the game, you don't need like we can just
Should be okay.
yeah, and then I'll ask directly.
When you all are placing something on the floor, just announce it to everyone so that everyone knows what you're putting down. So write it, announce it, and keep it down. And if you can, just try to get your hands on the paper and the pens and have it written by the time your turn comes so that it just happens a bit faster. But yeah, please say it out loud before you put it on the ground. And once you put it, that's it. Yeah? Okay, so Chan, give me now. So Chan, could you start off with the game? So just to kind of keep in mind, this is your city. You're building the city that you want to live in. So go for it.
Employment agency.
Public transport. But you know what? I'm going to put the public transport not in the center, but somewhere here, so that people can get around. Okay, that's right. You want some skyscraper? I think it should be under public park. No, 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 the policy.
Searching. Yeah, that's no, that's too much shelter.
I like the well-being.
No, let's go with the
Yeah, No, you need that. Yeah. No, no, no. Awesome. I like to put affordable but taxpayer subsidized housing. Okay, but where's the new one working? Okay. Which still adding more. Oh, now? Oh, they have that. Yeah, like yeah.
Apparently, another round.
Oh, okay. So then I want some more veggie garden. Yeah, I want a veggie garden.
Offline put the housing and then the commercial spaces like the housing, retail space, block, commercial and business spaces. Yeah.
Green space. The green space. Yeah, the shade trees also.
What was that?
Circle, please. Just sit down. Okay, thanks everyone. Um, if can one person from each city just volunteer, just tell the other team about what a small like a brief introduction about your city. Would anyone like to volunteer? Maybe from this side, someone from this team.
had a forest with a park next to it, and it had two homeless spaces. Had a citizen bank, had a hospital, had a school, had a library, it had a cemetery, solar planet.
Anyone from this side would like to volunteer just briefly about your city? Oh, you didn't hear it. So she said there were a lot of lagoons, forests, water, cemetery, community-run bank, public Wi-Fi, affordable housing, public park. I think you all had a Nelukuru, yes? You did, okay. Storage, a dog park, hospital, Inland Revenue Department. Someone from this side?
Yeah. So basically, actually, we had a lot of open spaces like parks and sorry. Yeah. So RCD, we had like a lot of open spaces, parks, of like community gardens, and we had like a centralized transport system, a sewage system, basically like a sewage treatment plant, and then also lake. Um, we also had shared residential and commercial spaces. Yeah, but we kind of forgot schools and yes, we have a solar power plant. So we have this.
Thanks, everyone. So I'll speak just very briefly about this idea of the city, the spaces, and how we make it livable, and some of our experiences in Colombo, where we all live. And Hasana here will be translating for me. She'll be translating to Tamil. But if anyone has any questions in Sinhala or any comments, we're happy to take them also. So I guess one main takeaway from the game that there were two groups, but one group here, they were a little bit more consultative. They discussed a little bit. And what I also noticed was that they sort of spread out a little bit. Whereas this group initially put everything on the floor first, and then they went into arranging everything on the grid. But what is really interesting is that y'all have this whole space, but y'all went right to the center. Both groups, y'all started off in the center, and and your when your turn comes, you'll put something on the ground, and then after about one round has gone, do you all start responding to what people have already put down? So I guess one question is, did you all want to, before anyone put it on the ground, did it occur to anybody to say, maybe we should all talk about it? Is our city landlocked? Is our city surrounded by a sea? Is it a hot country? Is it a cold country? But we kind of go in with our own ideas of the city. So this is where I kind of why I wanted to start off with the game, is to say that as Colombo, what we've seen over the years is that there is very, very little consultation, conversation about what is a livable city, who is this city for, and then we are then recipients of all these various development projects and development plans. And finally, some things may work for us, but some things that may work for us may not work for somebody else. For example, if you, I think I saw someone put affordable housing right, say, towards the end. Why don't we put affordable housing right in the middle and move out all our other things? Why do we always opt for some things to be in the middle and for some things to be in the periphery? Because we have also grown up in particular ways, where we think a city, everything has to be centralized. We all have to travel into the city to go to school, to go to work, to do our banking, all those things. So just maybe think about your own choices and what you observed in the way that other people also placed their tiles, and then kind of try to think of how we in Colombo have experienced urban development, at least in the last 10 years. Hi, எத்தனை பேருக்கு தமிழ் விளங்கும்? So அவங்க சொன்னதுல சுருக்கத்தை எல்லாருக்கும் அவங்க ஆங்கிலத்துல சொன்னது விளங்கி இருக்கக்கூடும், பட் சுருக்கமாக சொல்லலாம்னு நினைக்கிறேன். இதுல 2 குழுவாக பிரிஞ்சு வேலை செய்து 2 குழுவாக என்னென்ன எங்கட நகரத்துக்கு தேவைன்றதை எழுதி கொண்டிருந்தோம். ஆனா எழுதும் பொழுது எப்பவுமே சில விஷயங்கள் அவங்க அவதானிச்சிருந்தாங்க. எப்பவுமே எல்லாரும் வட்டமாக இருந்தாலும் கூட மையத்தில இருந்துதான் ஆரம்பிச்சிருந்தது ஒரு விஷயம். அந்த மையத்தில இருந்து ஏன் மையத்தில இருந்து ஆரம்பிக்கப்படுது, ஏன் நாங்க ஓரங்கள்ல இருந்து ஒரு விஷயத்தை நாங்க ஆரம்பிக்க இல்லை என்ற ஒரு விஷயம் பார்த்தது. மற்றது ஒரு நகரத்தை நாங்க எல்லாரும் சேர்ந்து உருவாக்கும் பொழுது முக்கியமாக நாங்க எங்களுக்குள்ள பதிச்சு கொண்டோமா, நாங்க 2 சுற்றுக்கள் விளையாடி இருந்தோம். அப்ப முதலாவதாக ஒன்றை வச்சுட்டு பிறகு 2வது சுற்று நாங்கள் விளையாடும் போதாவது நாங்க உண்மையில கூட நகரத்துக்கு என்ன தேவையாக இருக்குது, இது ஒரு சூடான நாடா அல்லது குளிர் நாடா அல்லது எங்களுக்கு கடல் வேணுமா, நதி வேணுமா, அல்லது என்ன எங்களுக்கு தேவையாக இருக்குங்கிறது எங்களுக்குள்ள கதைச்சு கொண்டோமா, ஒரு கலந்தாலோசித்து அந்த அடிப்படையில அந்த நகரத்தை செய்தோமா என்றத அதுக்காக இந்த விளையாட்டை நான் அவங்க இரோமியா அவங்க பயன்படுத்தி இருந்ததாக குறிப்பிட்டிருந்தாங்க. அதாவது கொழும்பை பொறுத்தவரையிலும் அல்லது ஒரு நகரத்தை உருவாக்கும் பொழுதும் கூட எப்பொழுதுமே மக்களோடு சேர்ந்து அது ஒரு கலந்தாலோசித்த முறையில அந்த நகரங்கள் அமைக்கப்படுறதில்லைன்றதுக்கு அவங்க அது ஒரு எடுத்துக்காட்டாக சொல்லியிருந்தாங்க. அதே நேரத்துல பார்த்தோம்னு சொல்லி சொன்னா அவ்வாறு நகர்ப்புறங்களை மையமாக வைத்து என்னென்ன விஷயங்கள் அந்த மையத்துக்கு வருதுன்றது, உதாரணமாக அஃபோர்டபுள் ஹவுஸ் என்ற விஷயங்கள் எடுத்து பார்த்தோம்னா ஒரு வீடு வசதியான அல்லது இருக்கக்கூடிய மாதிரியான வீடுகளை பார்த்தோம்னா அது இப்போ மையத்தில் இல்லாம எங்கேயோ தூரத்தில் இருக்கும். ஆனால் நாங்கள் எங்களோட வங்கிகளாக இருக்கலாம் அல்லது வேறு விடயங்களை கொண்டு வந்து நாங்க எங்களோட மையத்துல வச்சிருப்போம். ஏன் அப்படி அதை யார் திட்டமிடுறது, அது உண்மையில மக்களுக்கு அது இலக்குவானதாக முறையில வருதா என்ற விஷயங்களை பற்றி ஒரு திட்டமிடல் கொண்டு வரைகளை இந்த பிரச்சனைகள் சிக்கல்கள் இருக்கிறத அவங்க உதாரணமாக முன் வச்சிருந்தாங்க. இதை சுருக்கமாக சொல்றேன். நன்றி. So to talk about a very brief history, not brief history, just to talk very briefly about Colombo's urban development. After the end of the war, we experienced a huge urban regeneration drive. It was called the Urban Regeneration Project in Colombo, and it was with the aim of making Colombo into a world-class city. And these were the words that were used in planning documents, in speeches that were made. So world-class city, beautification, urban regeneration, and we are sort of right in the heart of a lot of what that happened, which are the walking paths, the paved streets, a lot of the new renovated spaces here, and all around us we see a lot of high rises coming up, a lot of high-end buildings, hotels, accommodation, housing, and so on. But what was also not discussed during that time of beautification was also the ugly side of the beautification, which I think a lot of us came to realize only much later. For example, I don't know if many of you here know that up to date, about 20,000 low-income families, daily wage workers have been evicted from Colombo into the periphery of the city, into these high-rise apartments that have been built by the Urban Development Authority. Pauline will speak more about that experience, so I won't go into it, but it is a part of a larger issue of urbanization, gentrification, beautification without consultation. If you think back about 2008, 2009, 2010, do any of you have any memory of sitting at a consultation about the Urban Regeneration Project? Were you consulted about walking paths? Were you consulted about whether we should have all these huge hotels coming up in Slave Island? We saw little bits of things being changed. People would start talking about how clean the streets are. They would say how there are not a lot of vendors on the pavement. They would say they'll say no slums and shanties, they are being cleaned. So we were recipients of this city, but we paid very little attention to what was happening in the city. And actually, a lot of time has passed, and we are using these spaces every single day without a lot of information or knowledge about what was there before and what was the process of getting here.
இந்த நகரத்தை திட்டமிடுறது என்னதை பற்றி பார்க்கும் பொழுது எங்களுக்கு 2008 2010 ஆண்டு காலத்துல உங்களுக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்கு நாங்கள் நகரத்தை புதுப்பிக்க போறோம் எழுப்ப போறோம் என்று ஏதாவது மக்களுடைய ஆலோசனைகளை கேட்ட சொல்லியது உங்களுக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்குதான்னு பார்க்கலாம். உண்மையில கொழும்பு நகரத்தை உலகத்தர ஒரு மிகவும் அழகு வாய்ந்த ஒரு நகரமாக உருவாக்குறதாக சொல்லிக்கொண்டு இந்த நகரங்களை கொழும்பு நகரத்தை அவர்கள் இவ்வாறு அபிவிருத்தி செய்து கொண்டு வந்தாங்க. அந்த அழகுபடுத்தல நாங்க பார்க்கலாம், உங்களை சுத்தி இருக்கிற இவ்வாறு கட்டப்பட்ட கட்டிடங்களாக இருக்கலாம், சில பூங்காக்களாக இருக்கலாம், இன்னும் ஸ்லேவ் ஐலண்ட் போன்ற இடங்கள்ல அங்கிருந்த மக்களை அகற்றிட்டு மிக உயர்ந்த கட்டிடங்களையும் சுற்றுலா தலங்களையும் ஹோட்டல் போன்ற தங்குமிடங்களையும் அவர்கள் உருவாக்கி இருக்கிறத நாங்க பார்க்கக்கூடியதாக இருக்கும். இது எதுவுமே எந்த ஒரு கலந்தாலோசனையும் இல்லாம செய்யப்பட்ட விடயமாக இருக்குது. ஸ்லேவ் ஐலண்டை பொறுத்தவரையில இன்றைக்கு வரைக்கும் கிட்டத்தட்ட 20,000 மக்கள் அங்க வாழ்ந்தவர்கள் அங்க இருந்து அப்புறப்படுத்தப்பட்டு இருக்கிறாங்க என்ற ஒரு விஷயம் சொல்லப்பட்டிருக்கிறது. அப்ப இந்த விஷயங்கள் எல்லாம் நடந்து கொண்டு இருக்கிறது என்றதும் எந்த ஒரு திட்டமிடலும் இல்லாம இது எப்படி அவர்கள் திட்டமிட்டார்கள், இப்ப என்ன நடக்குது, இது எப்படி இதை செய்து கொண்டு போக போறாங்க எந்த ஒரு அறிவித்தலுமோ அல்லது அதை பற்றிய தகவலோ அல்லது அதை பற்றிய கலந்தாலோசனையோ இல்லாம இந்த விஷயங்கள் செய்யப்பட்டு கொண்டு வருகிறது என்றதை சொல்லலாம்.
And we can't talk about urbanization or beautification in Colombo without talking about two really key things. One, militarization. Two, this idea of discipline. And the two of them go hand in hand. After the war ended, urban development was brought under the Ministry of Defense, and we had a new ministry called the Ministry of Defense and Urban Development. So that itself gives you the idea about the kind of the vehicle or the mechanism through which urban development was going to be achieved. So when we came out of the war, there was an image of the military as one that was of the brutalizer. All the imagery we had of military were of conflict zones, of the way that the war ended. And then a year or two later, what we see is the military engaged in civilian activities, in activities that are of beautification. So you move from the imagery of the military as a brutalizer to that of somebody engaged in beautification. So they are tending to the gardens, they are planting trees, they are pruning, flower bushes. They are basically keeping the city clean. And I know that there was a lot of acceptance for that kind of imagery to, it's very efficient. That's why the cities are clean. But see where we are today. A hugely militarized democracy, a militarized governance, a militarized city. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened in small ways, from tending to the garden to renovating this space right here. And those are the kind of processes that have been kind of, almost instilled in us, where we kind of take militarization as a given. And with that came the idea of discipline. And there's a really iconic almost interview that Gotabaya Rajapaksa gave to LMD in 2012, because he was the chief architect of Colombo's urban regeneration. He is the chief architect of this beautiful city. He was asked a question in this LMD interview where he said, you're moving these vendors, you're moving all these poor people out of the city to beautify it. They don't like it, but why do you do it? He said, no, it's, we are doing it for their own good. It's not like they don't like to live like that. We have to show them how to live. And with that, discipline will also come to them. So this idea of discipline was brought in so early in 2010, in 2011. But we didn't experience it because we were not being evicted. I think the very first time that people spoke about eviction and military use in urban development in Colombo was when the swimming club wall was broken down. Because that was the first time that sort of elite Colombo had this experience. But for a long time, people who had deeds to their houses, people whose village is Colombo, people who have lived here for generations, all around, just like walking distance from here, like a 1 minute walk. People were being evicted by the military without any due process, even if they went to the Human Rights Commission or to courts. It's not like people didn't do it. And it's not 10 people, it's not 15 people. We are talking about right now 20,000 families. If you assume a family has 4, you're looking at a huge amount of people. And it's not stopping at the 20,000. This whole project aims to relocate 65,000 families. That's realistically 500,000 people from the heart of Colombo, from their homes that they have built over the years into these high rises. And I guess the final thing I would say about their homes is that we have come to believe this government narrative that they are slums and shanties. But actually, if you go to any of these buses, I'm not denying that there are families who need better housing, whose houses flood 5-6 times a year. There are families like that. But majority of the families who have been moved actually had very nice houses, houses that they had built for generations, houses that are permanent houses, were actually really quite beautiful. They may be small houses, but they were really nice houses that were broken almost overnight as a part of this beautification project.
முக்கியமான 2 விஷயங்களை சொல்லலாம். இந்த நகரத்தை அழகுபடுத்துறதுக்கு கொண்டு செய்த 2 விஷயங்கள். ஒன்று வந்து இராணுவமயப்படுத்தல், அடுத்தது ஒழுக்க நெறிப்படுத்துறது அல்லது ஒழுக்கத்துக்குள்ள கொண்டு வர்றது அந்த மாதிரி சொல்லலாம். இராணுவமயப்படுத்தல் சொல்லும் பொழுது 2010, 2011ஆம் ஆண்டிலிருந்தே இந்த விடயங்கள் தொடங்கிட்டது. அப்ப யுத்தம் முடிந்த உடனேயே அதற்கு பிறகு இந்த இராணுவத்தை எல்லாம் வச்சுக்கொண்டு பூப்பண்டு நாட்டுறதும் பூப்பிக்கிறதும் வெட்டுறதுமாக அல்லது பூந்தோட்டம் வளர்க்கிறது எந்த விதமாக எவ்வாறு ஒரு சிவில் மனிதர்கள் எவ்வாறு நடந்து கொள்வார்களோ அதெல்லாம் இராணுவம் செய்ய தொடங்கினதாக எங்கட நாட்டுல அந்த நிலை மாறியது. அதற்கு பிறகு அவங்க நிறைய விடயங்கள் சொல்லியிருந்தாங்க. நான் சுருக்கமாக சொல்லி கொண்டு போறேன். அதை எவ்வாறு நியாயப்படுத்துகிறார்கள் கேட்டா, எல்எம்டி ஒரு பிரபலமான சஞ்சிகையில அவருக்கு எதிராக கோட்டாபய ராஜபக்ஷ அவர்கள்ட்ட கேட்ட நேரம், ஏன் இவ்வாறு நீங்கள் மக்கள் எல்லாம் ஒரு இரவில் இந்த நகரத்தை அழகுபடுத்துற என்ற அடிப்படையில எவ்வாறு மக்களை நீங்க அப்புறப்படுத்துறீங்க என்று கேட்ட நேரம் அவர் சொல்லியிருந்த பதில், மக்களை நாங்கள் அப்புறப்படுத்துகிறோம் ஏனென்று அவங்களுக்கு எப்படி வாழ்றது என்று தெரியாது, நாங்க அவர்களுக்கு கற்றுக் கொடுக்க வேண்டும் என்று சொல்லியிருந்தார்கள். உண்மையில இது மிகவும் பக்கத்துல இந்த இடத்திலிருந்து மிகவும் அண்மையில் இருக்கக்கூடிய நகரத்தின் மத்தியிலிருந்து வாழ்ந்த மக்களை கிட்டத்தட்ட 20,000 அவர்களுடைய குடும்பங்கள் அவ்வாறு அந்த மக்களை ஒரு இரவிலேயே அவர்கள் வாழ்ந்து வந்த வீடுகளில் இருந்து துரத்தி அடித்தார்கள் அல்லது அப்புறப்படுத்தினார்கள். அந்த வீடுகள் சில வீடுகள் உண்மையிலே மழை குலுக்கியதாகவும் வெள்ளம் வரக்கூடியதாக இருந்தாலும் கூட எத்தனையோ வீடுகள் அவர்கள் பரம்பரையாக வாழ்ந்ததாகவும் சின்ன வீடுகளாக இருந்தாலும் கூட திருப்தியாக அவர்கள் கட்டி வாழ்ந்த வீடுகளாக அவை இருந்தது. அந்த வீடுகளில் இருந்து அவர்கள் அப்புறப்படுத்தப்பட்டதை பார்க்கக்கூடியதாக இருக்கிறது. அதே நேரம் இந்த ஒழுக்கம் அல்லது மக்களை நாங்க இவர்கள் இப்படித்தான் வாழ பழக்க வேணும் என்ற அடிப்படையில இந்த எவ்வாறு யுத்தத்துக்கு பிறகு இராணுவம் மினிஸ்ட்ரி ஆஃப் டிஃபென்ஸ் அண்ட் அர்பன் டெவலப்மெண்ட் சொல்லியிருந்தாங்க. இராணுவத்துக்கும் அதே நேரம் புறநகர் விருத்திக்குமான ஒரு அமைச்சு உருவாக்கி இருந்தது. அதாவது இரண்டையுமே சேர்த்து உருவாக்கினதுல இருந்து அதில் இருக்கிற சிக்கல் தன்மையை எங்களால உணர்ந்து கொள்ளக்கூடியதாக இருக்கும் என்றும் சொல்லியிருந்தாங்க.
And just to end, before I hand over to Colin, what I also want to point out is that technically none of this was done. I mean, some of it was done illegally, but we also have laws and policies that can be abused or stretched to make this happen. For example, when private land is acquired for a public purpose, and Java Lane, where the Tata housing is coming, where Destiny Mall is coming up, and so many other places all over Colombo, they were acquired through gazettes. It's not like somebody rocked up and, evicted people. There was some vague form of due process that happened. And here, we don't also question it. Is a high-end luxury mall, is it a public purpose? What is a public purpose in that sense? Who is the public? What is the purpose? And do we know enough about how to challenge these gazettes when they are, printed? Do we even know how to look for a gazette to begin with? Do we know where to go and get that information? We generally only kind of get activated when things that happen more closer to our heart have, when it's close to home, basically. For example, when this new expressway, elevated expressway that's going through Rajagiriya, Madhivila, Thalangama, we saw a lot of like middle class, upper middle class families getting together, having protests, going to courts, which is great. But those issues were there in Colombo and other parts of the country for a long time. Why do we only learn about public purpose, about this idea of liberation of land, only when it happens very close to home? And even this idea of liberating land, what is it being liberated of? If you look at all the land parcels that have been acquired, saying we are liberating land for commercial purpose, for economic vehicles, what it generally means is that there are low-income families living in it, and it's not earning the state any money. It's in the heart of Colombo. Why should people live there when we could be giving it to a Shangri-La or a, I don't know, another big name hotel? And again, the question is, are these big investments, these high-end investments, are they going to bring the kind of returns that were promised to us? If you look at any of those big projects, the huge kind of tax benefits, the other kind of kickbacks that the developers and the owners of the hotels are getting, we have to question what is the benefit to us? They're going to be using our infrastructure, our electricity, our fuel, our sewage systems. People are being evicted. What are we getting in return? All of these are in the end high-end luxury malls. Do we need so many malls? Look at the malls we already have. They're empty. It's the same shops. So then the price that people are paying for this kind of development, is it really worth it? So I want to end there because I think Colin has an extremely compelling story and point of view to share, because he lived very close by to here, and they were moved from there into one of the government-built high-rise buildings. So I just want to hand over the mic.
Thank you so much, Hiromi. So the next session, Colin is going to speak in Sinhala. So if anyone needs interpretation to Tamil and English, we're really sorry we couldn't mobilize people today, volunteers, but we can do translations. So if anyone needs interpretation, like do we want to put show of hands maybe? Does anyone need interpretation for Sinhala? No. Okay, so is there anyone who can help out in that area? You can? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
සෑහෙන වැඩේද ගෙවල් වල සමහර කට්ටිය පෝලිං වල තියෙන මේ දවස් ටිකේ පෝල් නැතුව ඇති. ඒ නිසා බොහොම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා මේක ඔබනයිස් කරව urban labs අතරට අනිත් එක ඔක්කොම ඕගනයිස් කරපු සියලු දෙනාටම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. ඇත්තටම පැල්පත් සහ නාගරිකකරණය කියලා කතා කරන්න කලින් මම කියන්න ඕනේ මම අවුරුදු 25ක් හිටියේ මෙතන. ඒ කියන්නේ දන්නවා අතන තියෙනවා වත්තා. ඉස්සර දීප වත්තා. දැන් නැහැ වත්තා. තාරවත්ත කියලා කියන්නේ. ඔයගොල්ලන් ආල ඇති ඉස්සර රොයල් තෝමස් බිග් මැච් වල එන කට්ටිය මෙතන තමයි කාපාක් කරන්නේ. එතකොට රජයෙන් කියනවානේ හැම වෙලේම මම මොකද ඔය ඒක කියන්නේ ප්‍රධානම එක මොකද දැනගන්න ඕනේ මේ වල පිටුපස්සේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න සහ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ මොටිව් එක මොකක්ද කියලා. දැන් එතකොට එතනදී එතන වැලියු එක තියෙනවා නම් අවුරුදු 7කට කලින් අපි එතන ගියේ 2018. එතකොට දැන් තියෙන මෙතන වැලියු එක 15 මිලියන් ඇතිනේ. දන්නවනේ කොළඹ සන් වල 1.15 මිලියන්. එතකොට එතන ඒ වෙලාවේ 2018 පොයිසත් ඇවිල්ලාදී 10 මිලියන්. එතකොට ගෙවල් තිබ්බා එතන 160ක්. 160ක් අමතරව මුළු ඉඩම ප්‍රමාණය 1.5 hectares. purchase 240. එතකොට උගලන් ගණන් හදලා බලන්න ඒකේ වටිනාකම. එතකොට කොහොම හරි අපිව ගෙන් තල්ලු කරා දෙමළ කොට. මේ අපිට ආදරේට අර පිරොමිස් කිව්වා වගේ අර as per quotas මේ statement in LMD මේ මිනිසුන්ගේ ජීවිත නගා සිටීමට සහ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය වැඩි දියුණු කිරීමට මේ පැල්පත් වාසීන්ට මේ ෆ්ලැට්ස් දුන්න ඒ කතාව සම්පූර්ණයෙන් එතනින් තේරෙනවා. ඇත්තට මම මේ කතා කරන්නේ මගේ පෞද්ගලික අදහසක් විතරක් නෙවෙයි. කොළඹ තියෙන සීලම පැල්පත් වාසීන් සහ දැනට ජීවත් වෙන ෆ්ලැට්ස් වල ජීවත් වෙන මිනිසුන්ගේ සීලම ඒ මිනිසුන් මොකද හිතන්නේ කියලා තමයි මම මෙතන කියන්න හදන්නේ. එතකොට එතනින් අපිව කොහොම හරි UD එකේ අර පුෂ් කරලා දෙන්නකොට දැම්මා. ඒ කිව්වේ අර වගේ අපිට අපේ ජීවිත ගොඩනගා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැන් මෙතන අපි අදවන්නේ මෙතන පොඩි දෙල්ලමක් කරානේ. සාමාන්‍ය urban development පැත්තේ අඩුම ගානේ මොකද්ද තියෙන්න ඕනේ එක ඒ තැනක. ඉතින් education තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඊට පස්සේ economic wise develop වෙන්න ඕනේ. තුන්වෙනි එක environment develop වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ තුන දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා තියෙන ඕන තරම් ෆ්ලැට්ස් තියෙනවානේ. ඒවල ඒ තුනම දැකලා තියෙනවද ඔයගොල්ලෝ? ස්ක්වයර් ෆීට් එක කීයද? කොළඹ තියෙන වැඩිම ස්ක්වයර් ෆීට් තියෙන ෆ්ලැට් එක 105 වෙන ස්කීම් එක 2018 එක ඕපන් කරේ. මයිදුගල් සිටිය. ඒ කාලේ 540 අනිත් ගෙවල් ඔක්කොම 400 ස්ක්වයර්. එතකොට 400 ස්ක්වයර් ෆීට් කිව්වම රූම්ස් දෙකයි සාලයයි කිචන් එකයි පොඩි බල්කනියක් තියෙනවා 9ට. කියලා. ඒ වල ෆියුනරල් එකක් වුණාම කොෆින් එක ඇතුළට ගන්න විදියක් නැහැ. මේ ගෙදර සවුන්ඩ් සෙටප් එකක් දැම්ම ගමන් ඊළඟ ගෙදර ඒක යනවා. ළමයින්ට පාඩම් කරන්න විදියක් නැහැ. දැන් ඇත්තටම කියනවා මම කියන්න ආවේ දැන් ඔතනනේ අපි ඇදලා හිටිය අවුරුදු 25ක් අවුරුදු 25ක් මම ඔතන හිටියා. එතකොට අපේ අම්මලා තාත්තලා ඔක්කොම අවුරුදු 50ක ඊට කලින් හිටියා. එතකොට ඒවා සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කියනවානේ අර ඔප්පු නැති ඉඩම් කියලානේ කියන්නේ. ඉතින් අපේ තාත්තලාගේ අපේ අම්මලාගේ අපේ තාත්තා ට්‍රැවල් දුවෙක් කෙනෙක්. ට්‍රැවල් සංගීතේ මෙතන. තව ස්ටෑන්ඩ් එකක් තින්නේ NIBM එක ගාව. තව එකක් තිබ්බා BMS එක ගාව. එතකොට අපේ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වයේ ගොඩනගා අපි හිටියේ අවුරුදු ගාණක් අවුරුදු 50ක් 100ක් ගාණක් ඇතිලා තිබ්බේ ඒ හරිය. ට්‍රැවල් දෙවුවා මේ වටේ තියෙන රාජායතන වලට කැම සැපෙවුවා. ඒ කියන්නේ කේටරින් සර්විස් වගේ ඒවා. ඊට පස්සේ උතන මේ ඉස්සර බස් ආවා. දැන් මෙතන ඩෙවලොප් වෙලා තියෙන ඉස්සර මේවා තමයි ඉස්කෝලේ ළමයි දුර පළාත් වෙලා ආවා. මේවා තමයි ගෝල්ඩ් ෆේස් වගේ. මේ බස් දාලා ඔක්කොම පෙන්නවා මේ හරි. පල්ලෙහා මියුසියම් එකක් තියෙනවා. මෙතනමත් පාඩම් කරේ. ඒ කියන්නේ අපේ ගෙවල් වල කරන්ට් තිබ්බේ නැහැ. අමාරු පාඩම් කරන්න සද්දෙට. මේ අයයට අවිලා තමයි අපි ඔක්කොම පාඩම් කරේ. පාඩම් කරලා හරි. ඒතකොට අපි ඔක්කොම බලන් හිටියේ. ඒතකොට අපේ ආර්ථිකය ගොඩනගලා අපි ඩෙවලොප් වෙලා තිබ්බේ මේ පරිසරය හරහා. දැන් අවුරුදු 100ක් තිස්සේ අපි මේ එකපාරට මේ ඩෙවලොප් වෙලා එකපාරට අපි මෙතනින් එතනට යනවා කියන්නේ මෙතන ගෙවල් 160යි. එතන දැන් තියෙනවා 1500ක්. එමඩ කොට. සාස්පුර තියෙනවා ඒ වගේ ට්‍රිපල්. සාස්පුර කියන්නේ මේ ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් එකේ පිටිපස්සේ ඕවල් එක ගාව තියෙන ඒ ස්කීම් එක අසල් ඒ වතු ආල්ටර් ප්‍රදේශ. ඊට චුට්ටක් හිතලා බලන්න අපිට එක මාසයක් අපිට සැලරි එක ඩිඩක්ට් කොවිඩ් කාලේ ඩිඩක්ට් කරාම අපිට ඊළඟ මාස සර්වයිව් වෙන්න අමාරුයි. අවුරුදු කාලයක් අපේ ඉකොනොමික් එක ඩිපෙන්ඩ් වෙලා තිබ්බ දැනක ඉඳලා අපිට ශනික අනිත් පැත්තට ගියාම අපේ ඉකොනොමික් කොහොමද යන්නේ කියලා. ඒතකොට ගොඩක් කට්ටිය රියල් දුවන්න බැරුව ගියා කිලෝමීටර් 8ක් තියෙනවා එතන ඉඳලා මේ ස්ටෑන්ඩ් එකට එන්න. ඒතකොට ඔයගොල්ලන් මොනවද තේයිද? තෙල් පුච්චක නේද? නෑනේ. කැම දාන්න මෙතනට එනවද? නෑනේ. ඒ වගේ ගොඩක්ම ආර්ථිකයට තමයි ඔක බලපෑවේ. අනිත් එක දැන් මේගොල්ලන් කියනවා මේ මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ජීවිත ගොඩ ගන්නව කරා කියලා. එහෙමනම් මොකද්ද කරලා තියෙන්න ඕනේ? ඒ ඉඩම් අපි වරිපණක් ගෙවන්න නැතුවා. ගෙවන්න දුන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ ඔක්කොම ඇතුළේම ගේම් තමයි කට්ටිය ඔක්කොම මේකට આવුත්. එතකොට අපි ඒව ගෙවන්න නැතුවා. ගෙවන්න නැතුවම අපිට ගෙවන්න දුන්නේ නැහැ. කරන්ට් තිබ්බේ නැහැ. ඊට පස්සේ කරන්ට් ගත්තා කොහමද? ඒ ගෙවල් වලට අපි දැන් ඉන්න 540 ස්ක්වයර් ෆීට් ගෙවල් වලට අවුරුදු 30ක් 3000 ගානේ ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. අවුරුදු 30ක් 3000 ගානේ ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. ලක්ෂ 16යි 80 ගාණක් යනවා. එතකොට මෙතන මෙච්චර වටිනාකමක් තියෙන තැනක ඉඳලා අපි එතනට දීලා ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. මොකද නාගරිකකරණය කියන්නේ. මොකද දැන් මොනවද දැන් තියෙන්නේ? චයිනීස් එම්බසි එකේ මේ වෝකින් පාත් එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට අප්නේ දැන් කියලා බලන්න පුළුවන්. උතන් දුරක් තියෙනවා. දැන් කියලා බලන්න පුළුවන්. බාස්කට්බෝල් කෝට් එකක් තියෙනවා. ඉස්සරහට ස්විමින් පූල් එකක් හදනවා. ඒක කාටද නාගරිකකරණය වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? කාගේ ජීවිතද උඩනගලා තියෙන්නේ? අපේ. හිතන්න ඕනේ දේවල් නේ මේවා. එතකොට දැන් කොහොමද ඔයගොල්ලන් දැකලම නැද්ද වතු? මේ ආවට වතු දැකලම නැද්ද? නැත්නම් ඔක්කොම ෆ්ලැට් දීලාද ඔක්කොමට? අයි ඒවා තාම අතවත් තියලා නැත්තේ. ඒ ඉඩම් වලට වටිනාකමක් නැහැ. ඒ ගොඩක් තියෙන ලේන්ස් තියෙන්නේ. මේ වගේ ලේන් එකක් තියෙන්නේ. මේ වගේ ලේන් එකක් දුන්නා මොකලම් පර්චේස් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද ඒක? බහු රාජ්‍යනවන ලොකු ආයතන වලින් ඇවිල්ලා ගනේද? ගන්න නැහනේ. ඒක තමයි ප්‍රධානම හේතුව. ඉතින් මෙතන තියෙන්නේ මේ බොරුවට නාගරිකකරණය සහ මිනිසුන්ගේ ජීවිත වැඩි දියුණු කරනවා කියලා සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම තියෙන්නේ අර as per law මේ ඉඩම් අත්පත් කිරීම. අරගෙන ඒවා එහෙමනම් දෙන්න ඕනේ මිනිසුන් ඔක්කොම යාපතක් වෙන්න නම් හැමෝටම දෙන්න ඕනේ සාහනයක්. මිනිසුන්ට දැන් අපේ ගෙවල් ගත්තම අපේ ගෙවල් වල අපි ගෙවල් වල අර වැලිකඩ රිමාන්ඩ් එකේ ඉන්නවා වගේ තමයි අපි ඉන්නේ. උදේට වැට් යනවා, ආයෙත් ගෙදර එනවා, ආයෙත් ඊළඟ දවස් උදේට වැට් යනවා. ඒ වල මුකුත්ම නැහැ. පාරවල් ස්ට්‍රීට් ලයිට් උනුත් නැහැ. මේ ඒවා මේ මැනේජ්මන්ට් කරන්න UD එකේ. කිසිම දෙයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. බොහොම අමාරුවෙන් තමයි ඉන්නේ. ඒ කොවිඩ් කාලේ මිනිසුන්ට ඇන්සයිටි ආවා. ડિප්‍රෙෂන් ආවා. ඒවල් ඇතුළේ ඉඳලා. අපි දැන් ඒගොල්ලන් කරන්නේ නැති වුණාට අපි කමියුනිටි සොසයිටිස් සාර අපි රික්වෙස්ට් කරලා දෙනවා. අපි ලයිබ්‍රරි එකක් දාලා දෙන්න. අපිට ජිම් එකක් දාලා දෙන්න සෙල්ලම් කරන්න. අන්න ඒ හේතුව දැන් වෙනසකට තියෙන්නේ වතු වුණාම වතු මෙහෙම තිබ්බේ දැන් ඉන්නේ වතුව විදියට දැන් සම්සේන උඩට දෙන්නේ. එච්චරයි. කිසිම වෙනසක් නැහැ. ඒක තමයි මම හැමදාම කියන්නේ ඒක තමයි. ඒතර අද වෙනකන් අපි අවුරුදු 4මාරක් කියනවා UD කිසිම රාජ ආයතනයක ඇවිල්ලා බැලුවේ නැහැ. වැඩක් නැහැ නේ මේක ඉතින් අස් කරගත්තනේ කොහොම හරි. මේ එක තැනක්. ඒ වගේ තමයි ඔක්ෂල් ස්ට්‍රීට් එකේ. ඊට පස්සේ මේ මෙතන 60වත් කියලා එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒකටත් තියන්න බෑ. ඒ වලට ඩොකියුමන්ට්ස් තියෙන නිසා. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලන් තාපත් කරන්නේ නැහැ මේ වගේ දේවල්. ඊට පස්සේ දැන් අපේ ෆ්ලැට් වලට ගත්තාම ගොඩක්ම මිනිස්සු අසරණ වෙලා ඉන්නේ. මිනිසුන්ට රුපියල් 3000ක් ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. මාසෙ රුපියල් 3000ක් ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. ගෙවන්න නැතුනම ඇවිල්ලා වතුර කපනවා. ඉතින් මෙතන ආර්ථික නැති කරගෙන ඉන්න මිනිස්සු වගේක් එතන ඉන්නේ. එතකොට එහෙම ඉඳී මිනිස්සුන්ට රුපියල් 3000ක් UD එකට මේ ගෙදර රෙන්ට් එක රෙන්ට් එක කියන්නේ අර 3000 ඉන්ස්ටෝල්මන්ට් එක ගෙවන්න මෙතන කවුරු ගෙවන්න පුළුවන්ද? එහෙම නැත්නම් ළමයින්ට කන්න බොන්න දෙනවද ඒක? කරන්ට් බිල් ගෙවන්න බෑ. ඒ කියන්නේ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වේ කඩා වැටලා තියෙන්නේ. මිනිස්සුන් කොහොමද 1500ක් ගෙවල් එතන දිනනවා නම් අයර් ට්‍රේවිල් එකේ කී දෙනෙක් දුවන්න පුළුවන්ද? හැමෝටම ට්‍රේවිල් දිනන කල්පලියට ඔක්කොම යන්න බෑනේ. ඒකට මේ කරන්නේ ඔක්කොම ගෙනල්ලා එක තැනට දාලා ඒ කියන්නේ අපේ මෙතන තිබ්බ වතු විතරක් නෙමෙයි කොළඹනේ වතු වැඩියෙන්ම තියෙන්නේ. ඒ වතු ඔක්කොම එක තැනට ගෙනල්ලා අර තීන ඉඩම් ටික අත්පත් කිරීම තමයි ප්‍රධාන මනෝබල. එතකොට නාගරිකකරණය කියලා මිනිස්සුගේ ජීවිත පුරා ගන්න නෙමෙයි. එහෙම ගොඩ නගනවා නම් අපි ඉල්ලන දේවල් අපිට මේ ඉඳන් අපි වේ කියලා දැම්මේ CCTV කැමරාවක් දාලා දෙන්නම්, ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් එකක් දාලා දෙන්නම්, ලැබරටරි දාලා දෙන්නම්. අවුරුදු 4මාරක් විතර එනවා තාම මේ ගිනිනිවන මේ උපකරණ වල සර්විස් කරලා නැහැ. කුණු වදින්නේ නගර සභාවේ. ඒත් අර රික්වෙස්ට් කරන නිසා කුණු වදිනවා. ඉතින් එහෙම මට හිතන විදියට ඔයගලන්ට තේරෙයි වතු වල ඉන්න මිනිස්සුන්ට අපි ඇත්තට මේ ඉන්නේ සතුටෙන් හිටියා. ගෙවල් වල වතුර දාමා ගෙවල් වල හිටියත් හරි අපේම කියලා දෙයක් තිබ්බා අපිට වෙනම ප්‍රෙෂර් එකක් තිබ්බේ නැහැ. මේ වලට ආවම වියදම් වැඩි වුණොත් මිසක් කිසිම දෙයක් වුණේ නැහැ. ඒක තමයි තියෙන්නේ. ඔයාලා පුළුවන් නම් ඇවිල්ලා බලන්න දෙමළ කොටස සංස්කෘතිය තියෙන මට්ටපුලිය තියෙන මේ පැති වල තියෙන ෆ්ලැට්ස් වලට ඇවිල්ලා මිනිස්සුන්ට කතා කරලා දැනගන්න පුළුවන්. මේ අපි ළඟදී මේ හැම ගෙදරටම අපි 5 kg rice දුන්නා හැම ගෙදරටම පුළුවන් විදියට. අපි ඒ වගේ වැඩ කරනවා. කියන්නේ ඉලෙක්ට්‍රිසිටි බිල්ස් ගෙවනවා. ඒ වගේ තමයි ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් එක අපි හැමදේම සිදු කරන්නේ. මිනිසුන්ට අපි කතා කරද්දී ඒක දැනෙනවා. පිටෙන් නම් බලද්දී ඒක මිනිසුන්ට දැනෙන්නේ නැහැ. මිනිස්සු හිතන්නේ මේ ඇත්තටම සතුටුදායක ජීවිතයක් තමයි මිනිස්සු ගත කරන්නේ කියලා. එහෙම නෙමෙයි. පුළුවන් නම් ඔයගොල්ලන් චුට්ටක් කතා කරන්න කට්ටියත් එක්ක ආවලා බලන්න. ස්ලම්ස් වලට වතු වල ඉතියට වැඩිය පාත් තත්ත්වය තමයි දැන් මිනිස්සු ඉන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ වැටිලා. හැම පැත්තෙන් වැටිලා. අනිත් එක ඉස්සර ඉස්කෝලේ ගියේ මෙයාවට තිබ්බ ස්කෝල් වලට කිලෝමීටර් 8ක් ඉඳන් මේන්න ඕනේ. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඕනම ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙන අම්මා තාත්තා කෙනෙක්ට අනිවාර්යෙන් කොටි මාසවත් තමයි තමන්ගේ ළමයාට හොඳම අධ්‍යාපනය ලබා දෙන්නේ. ඒකත් දෙන්න බැරි තත්ත්වයක තමයි තියෙන්නේ. ඒ නම් මේන්න බෑනේ. ඒ නිසා මොකද්ද කරන්නේ? ඒ ළඟ තියෙන ස්කෝල් වලට යවනවා. ඒ ස්කෝල් වල ගොඩක්ම උගන්වන එකත් ප්‍රශ්න වැඩි අඩුයි. ඉතින් ඒ ප්‍රශ්න බලපාලා තියෙන වටේටම තියෙන ඒ ප්‍රශ්න. ඉතින් ඒව තමයි අපිට කියන්න ඕනේ ප්‍රශ්න. ඉතින් අපිට කණ්ඩ බොන්න නැතුව මට කණ්ඩ බොන්න නැතුව මම ඉන්නවා නම් දරලිපවල් දැකලා තියෙනවා ෆ්ලැට් වල. දරලිපවල් තියෙනවා ෆ්ලැට් වල. දරලිපවල් තියෙනවා. ඇයි ගෑස් එකක් ගන්න කියන්නේ නැහැ. රුපියල් 3500ක් දීලා ගෑස් එකක් දෙනවද? අර ළමයින්ට කන්න දෙනවද? බේත් ගන්න ඕනේ. ගෙදර පවුලේ අඩු ගන්න ළමයි 3 දෙනෙක් දෙන්නෙක් ඉන්නවා 5 දෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. ඒතර කොහොමද ඒක සර්වයිව් වෙන්නේ කියන්නේ? ඒ වගේ සෑහෙන ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා. අපි බොහෝ අපි try කරන්නේ ඒ පැත්තේ ඉන්න ළමයින්ට පොඩි education wise අපි growth එකක් දෙන්න. අනිත් පැත්තේ ඒගොල්ලන්ට income එක කියන්නේ income එක වැඩි කරලා දිනු කරන්නත් ඒ කියන්නේ පොඩි පොඩි catering service එකම අපිට පුළුවන් විදියට මේ පැත්තේ ඒවා අරන් දෙන්න. ඊට පස්සේ ඔය entry level දුවන කට්ටියට පොඩි පොඩි training programs වගේ දීලා technical wise දීලා ඒ වගේ තමයි අපි මේ දවස්වල වැඩ කරා කියන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒක තමයි ප්‍රධානම හේතු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ වතු සහ නාගරිකකරණය අතර තියෙන. සාමාන්‍ය නාගරිකකරණය කිව්වම අර තුනම තියෙන්න එපා. education, environment and economic. ඒ තුනම නැතුව නිකන් පිටි අතරක් ඇතුළේ මිනිස්සු ඉන්නවා කියන්නේ ඒක ඇත්තටම කනගාටු දෙයක්. ඒක මිනිස්සු ගොඩක් මිනිස්සුන්ට ඒක තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. නිලධාරීන්ටත් තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. එළියේ ඉන්න මිනිස්සුන්ටත් තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක ඇත්තටම ෆීල් වෙන්නේ ඒ වල ජීවත් වෙන මිනිස්සු.
කලින් ඇත්තටම අපි හැමෝටම විශාල ප්‍රජා අධ්‍යාපනයක් අද හම්බුණා කියලා මම හිතනවා. ඉතින් අද කතා කරමු. දැන් ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා නම් අහන්න පුළුවන් දෙන්නගෙම. If you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. And I can pass the megaphone. Anyone?
Sorry, I can't answer. You mentioned that you mentioned that there was this image of the military as being a brutal force, and that was changing to one that could unify the country. So I was just curious. I was not sure at that time. So in the South also, did the military have the same image as a brutal force in the popular imagination? One day those soldiers who won the war, one day war victors, and so wouldn't it have been a more seamless transition into now? You eradicated one issue, now we'll just beautify and eradicate all the ugliness of the state. So wouldn't it have also been about that? Your question. Shall I ask Colin's question also? Colin mentioned how there are way more houses now in this high-rise arrangement, right? Compared to how they lived in long rows of homes. Now we're all vertically placed. I'm interested, I know of your work working with communities that are trying to assert their rights while being displaced. But whether, I want to ask you, is there a sense of community in this vertical high-rise? Have there been attempts to mobilize by the residents of these homes? And of course, from your presentation, it was evident they don't get any solidarity from elsewhere. So what has been their experience of trying to articulate this?
We have one more question, so shall we take?
Thank you, Robin, for your presentation. Thank you, Robin. And just a comment. Yeah. You can translate from Tamil to English. Tamil. Very good. And தமிழ்ல அது கூட உணர்வோட சொல்லலாம். இருக்கிற இடத்துல இருந்து விரட்டப்படுறது லேசான விஷயம் இல்லை, ரொம்ப மனசுக்கு கஷ்டமான விஷயம். அப்படியான உங்களோட வாழ்க்கை அனுபவத்தை எங்களுக்கு எல்லாரும் சேர்ந்து நீங்க பகிர்ந்து கொண்டதுக்கு ரொம்ப தேங்க்யூ. நீங்க பகிர்ந்ததுக்கு ரொம்ப மரியாதை பட்டு நான் உங்களுக்கு சொல்லணும். Yeah, I said, so being removed or eviction from a place where you used to live is not that easy, right? So you have come here, shared your that painful experience, and I have huge respect and love for that. Thank you very much.
Hi, I got it. I just want to know when these evictions, when these evictions were happening, how much of a pushback the community did, like what kind of protest, what kind of attempts you made, were there court cases, were there ministers doing anything, like were you able to push back? Were they?
Thank you for the question. Samira, to answer your question first, yes, I agree. I think the image of the military that we have here in the south is of course very different to what we saw in the north. But what we do remember from that time is that kind of like um, very brutal imagery that came out of the war. Of course, it was also shown to us in a particular way of, the military rescuing people who were in the, no-fire zone or crossing over. So there were those kinds of imagery of, the hero, the savior, and all of that. But it was still a very sort of a war related kind of content that was very sort of etched in our minds at that time. And then in that sense, it wasn't a very seamless transition because when you see so many people in military fatigue in Colombo in civilian activities, it did take a little getting used to, because for the government also, because they wanted to promote this as a world-class city, you want tourists and people, being here in the city to come to the city to also not have that kind of an image of the war. So, in this world-class city, if we also don't want to remember the war, we are, it was almost like being reborn. We have Port City, we have all these other iconic buildings coming up, and then any association with the war will only take us back to what, this dark time. Whereas if we then have that transition where we associate the military with more civilian activities, whether it's selling vegetables somewhere or doing landscaping in Colombo, then we kind of normalize this military, and the militarization we experience every day is sort of, I think, the short answer to your question. Rohini, I think Colin would probably be much better at, talking about their process. But more generally, what we saw in Colombo was that there wasn't a big sort of coming together of community. Communities were being targeted separately, and we didn't necessarily see a huge, protest say at Golface kind of thing. We didn't see civil society organizations coming and talking about it. Most civil society organizations and most people working on these kinds of issues were, I think, at that time, very preoccupied by what happened with the war and the aftermath, that we didn't see what was happening right under our nose, that evictions were happening, across the street where we would be having a coffee. And with the communities, it was a lot harder because there had been no kind of culture or history of organizing during that time. In the 80s, there were community development councils that were, that convened under the CMC. There were community leaders. There were, CDCs were very active in these communities. But by the time it came to like 2008, 2009, most of those communities, those councils were no more. So even for communities to get together to file a case, to find lawyers, to get any kind of information, it was very hard because they did have some hands, but some didn't have. And what we saw was that communities did individual fights. One Vasta went to the Human Rights Commission, another Vasta went to the Court of Appeal, another Vasta went to the Supreme Court. And it was a very scary time. And I think the tone was set by the Muse Street eviction in May 2008, 2010, where there was an eviction of 19 families in Slave Island on a Saturday in broad daylight, where bulldozers and military came, cordoned off the area, and basically broke 19 houses in Slave Island in broad daylight. And people lost their IDs, people lost their birth certificates, people lost very valuable housing documents because they were not even given that 5 minutes to go and pick up their stuff. And this is like within, I think everyone knows where Burger King is. It's a stone's throw from there. And it happened on a Saturday afternoon. And that sort of set the tone for the eviction. So a lot of the communities that we worked with after that obviously then gave in to the military harassment, because when a military guy comes with a gun and says you have a week to leave, you know what has happened before. And even to get the resources, to get a lawyer, to go to the Human Rights Commission, those things take time. And that's not to say people didn't. People went to court, they went to Supreme Court, they went to the Court of Appeal, they went to the Human Rights Commission. Some had a fair outcome, some didn't progress very far. People had little protests. They did whatever they could, but it was a part of a larger project and they didn't have any backing from anybody else. They didn't have the kind of, they didn't have all of us basically coming with our boards, coming with our megaphones, coming with our, candles to stand by them. They were very much alone and we were not there. We came very late, like even when I started working on it, it was 2013. And by then, so many people had already been evicted. And since then, every month people continue, even now people continue to be evicted, but we don't stand with them with our votes. So they are also isolated because we don't know how to bring them into this larger context. We think it's something so separate from us, but it's not. It's all connected, from our power cuts to the evictions to our cost of gas. It's all connected. And we are only, making those connections now. So that's, sorry, a very long answer to your question.
Why I said the same, like the vertical and horizontal, it means there's no difference. We live in the slums, so there's no difference in the flats. මම කියන්නේ කිසිම difference එකක් නැහැ. මම මේ ඉන්න ඒ ඉන්න එකම තමයි. මෙතන ඉන්න වැඩිය පාතර තමයි අපි වැටලා දෙන්නේ එතන. හැමෝම එහෙම තමයි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. මෙතන හිටියාම රුපියල් 3000ක් ගෙවන්න තිබ්බේ නැහැනේ. මෙතන අපිට අපේ ජීවන රටාවට අනුව තමයි අපි මෙතන හිටියේ. එතනට ගියාම හැමදේම වැඩි වුණා. ඉතින් ඒක තමයි මම එතන කිව්වේ. කියන්නේ ඩිෆරන්ට් නැහැ. ස්ලම්ස් වල ඉන්නයි ෆ්ලැට් වල ඉන්න දෙකම එකයි. අනිත් එක ඉරොමිස් කිව්වා වගේ ස්ලේව් අයිලන්ඩ් එකේ ඉඳන් කල්ලාප මිනිස්සුත් එතන තමයි ඉන්නේ. හැමෝම එක sorry. இல்ல உயரமான கட்டத்தில் தனித்தனியா யாரும் இல்லை. ஏன்னா நாங்க ஒரு முறை பட்டணம் தான் இங்கிறது. அதனால நாங்க இங்க நாங்களும் முன்ன வேலைக்கு போறது வீட்டுக்கு வர்றது அப்படிதான் இருந்தோம் இங்க இருக்கும்போது. அப்புறம் நாங்க இங்க இருந்து எப்படி சரி எங்களை அங்க இருந்து அப்புறப்படுத்தினாங்க தானே. அதுக்கப்புறம் நாங்க என்ன பண்ணோம், இங்க இருந்து அங்க போனதுக்கு அப்புறமே நாங்க சொசைட்டிஸ் பில்ட் பண்ணோம். ஒவ்வொரு சொசைட்டி டெவலப்மெண்ட் சொசைட்டிஸ் பில்ட் பண்ணி அதுல நான் இப்ப மோர் தென் 4.5 இயர்ஸா நம்ம ஃபிளாட்ஸ்ல பிரசிடெண்டா இருக்கேன். அப்படிதான் நாங்க எல்லா இஷ்யூஸ்க்கும் நாங்க இப்ப சொல்யூஷன்ஸ் நாங்க எடுத்துக்கிறோம். இன் ஃபியூச்சர்லயும் முடிஞ்ச அளவு மக்களுக்கு உதவி செஞ்சுக்கிட்டு எல்லாத்தோடையும் குடும்பமா தான் நாங்க பயணிக்க ஆசைப்பட்டோம் தவிர தனித்தனியா போனா கஷ்டம். அங்க உதாரணத்துக்கு ஒரு எங்களோட பக்கத்து வீட்டுல பக்கத்து வீட்டுல ரெண்டல் கட்ட முடியாம இருக்கிற தருணம் யூடியில வராங்க வெட்டுறதுக்கு வாட்டர் தண்ணிய. அந்த நேரம் நாங்க என்ன செய்யறது, அவங்களுக்காக குரல் கொடுக்கறது. அப்படி இருந்தா மட்டும் நாங்க அந்த அது மாதிரி நாங்க இங்க இருந்திருந்தா அது நடந்திருக்காது. புரியுதா? அது மாதிரி நாங்க இங்க இருந்திருந்தா அது நடந்திருக்காது. அந்த ஒரு முறை சுடுகண்ட போன திரும்ப அடுப்படி நாடான்னு சொல்லுவாங்களே, அந்த சிச்சுவேஷன் தான் இப்ப நான் அங்க இருக்கு. அதனால நாங்க யாரையும் விட்டுறது இல்லை. எந்த ஒரு அரசாங்க நிறுவனத்துல இருந்தாலும் ஒரு பொலிட்டிக்கல் யாரு இருந்தாலும் நாங்க எதுக்குமே விட்டுறது இல்லை. எங்களோட பிரச்சனை இதுதான். இப்ப லாஸ்ட் டைம் கடைசியாக 2020 எலெக்ஷன்ல பார்லிமெண்ட் எலெக்ஷன்ல 1.5 மில்லியனுக்கு தேவையான எல்லா விஷயங்களும் நாங்கள் எடுத்துக்கிட்டோம். சேர்ஸ், டென்ஸ், அப்புறம் வீடுகளுக்கு தேவையான ராஸ்பான், சமையல் பாத்திரங்கள், குக்கர், சிங், அதெல்லாம் நமக்கு தேவையானது. அதெல்லாம் எல்லாரும் சேர்த்துக்கிட்டு தான் நாங்கள் அந்த பயணத்தை சிசிடிவி கேமரா அதெல்லாம் நாங்கள் ஃபிட் பண்ணிக்கிட்டோம். அதெல்லாம் குடும்பமா இருக்கிறதுனால தான் எங்களுக்கு செஞ்சுக்கிற முடிஞ்ச சிச்சுவேஷன் எப்பயுமே அங்க இல்லை. அதனால எப்போதுமே நாங்கள் குரல் கொடுக்கறது எல்லாம் ஒன்றா தான்.
Any other questions?
So what would you say are the top 5 asks for non-negotiable when it comes to city development, right? Especially for Colombo, what needs to be done? And for Colin, and efforts, how can we support you in your movement? And what other work needed that needs to be done to address some of the issues that
Thanks, that's a great question. That's almost like a wish list, I think. So I think just off the top of my head, 5 like non-negotiable asks. One thing would definitely be consultation. We can't have this kind of development happening or continuing without any kind of consultation. We need to know what is in the development plans. They need to be presented to us. We need to have a say. Second thing, I think non-negotiable, I think for all of us, is that there is no coming back from this situation. We have to stand with the communities. We have to question everything that we see. If you are, for example, on your way to work every day, if you're used to seeing a particular vendor and he's not there anymore, make the effort to see where he went. Maybe he was evicted somewhere. Maybe he was put in the floating market where he doesn't have any business. If you see a lot of things that are different in the city, question them. Don't think that they are, just don't take it as a given is, I think, my second non-negotiable. Third is don't believe in the kind of development plans and the kind of development ideas that are fed to us. For example, when they say that, land is limited, we can't have people living on the ground always. We have to densify. I agree, but there is a way to densify. There are better ways to build better housing. So the next time someone tells you that, it's really good for people, low-income communities to live in these high rises, think about what Colin said to you today. Maybe also take the time to read about so many things that have been written in all 3 languages about what has happened in Colombo, about the kind of lives that people live in the high rises. The fourth, I think, non-negotiable is that don't believe people who say there are slums and shanties in Colombo. I think my friends here will know that if there's one thing that really pisses me off is when people say slums and shanties. Please go to these busters, or if you don't know, we are happy to introduce you to some of the places that we work in. Don't call these communities slums and shanties because you feed into the government's narrative. You make the government narrative stronger because then it makes it easier to evict people. Because you think slum dwellers are being evicted. They are not slum dwellers. Their houses are really nice, and if they need to be uplifted in any way, there are ways to do it. So the next time you hear someone play slum and shanties in Colombo, question it. There's a lot of data available about these things. It's not things that I'm just telling you. There are surveys done by CMC that tells you that 90% of low-income settlements in Colombo fall into the category of permanently upgraded. Even our census doesn't count it. So why do we believe the UDA when they say 65,000 families in Colombo live in slums and shanties? And I think my fifth non-negotiable is we don't need all this luxury living if people are being left behind, if people in the heart of the city are starving, if people can't send their kids to school, if parents are making the decision between sending one child to school and keeping the other child behind, then there's no point in having a child and kids or a Zara in the heart of Colombo. Those two realities can't exist
and it is a real shame if we think that they have to exist together. So, right? Yeah.
ඇතරම දැන් අපි තියෙන පතු මේ කොට්ලැට්ස් වල තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න තමයි ගොඩක්ම මිනිසුන්ට ඔය කොවිඩ් වලින් පස්සේ ජොබ්ස් නැති වුණා. ගොඩක්ම වැඩ කරන්නේ ලේබරර්ස්ලා තමයි වැඩි 100ට 75ක ලේබරර්ස්ලා ඉන්නේ. after then rickshaw three wheel drivers ලා ඉන්නේ. ඊට පස්සේ ඉන්නේ ගොඩක් ක්ලීනින් සර්විස් කරන කට්ටිය. ඉතින් කොවිඩ් වලින් පස්සේ මිනිසුන්ගේ ගොඩක් ගත්තේ නැහැ. ඒ වල ඉන්න කට්ටිය මොකද ඊට පස්සේ ආරයන් පාරෙන් තමයි කොවිඩ් ප්‍රශ්න ඩෙල්ටා එක ඉස්සෙල්ලාම අයිඩෙන්ටිෆයි වුණේ. ඊට පස්සේ ගොඩක් කට්ටියට අමාරු වුණා. ඒ අමාරුවත් එක්ක දැන් තියෙන ක්‍රයිසිස් එක වැඩි කරා. එතකොට දැන් තියෙන ප්‍රධානම ප්‍රශ්නේ කෑම ප්‍රශ්නේ තමයි. කෑම ප්‍රශ්නය සමහර කට්ටිය දවසට ඕනනම් දෙපාරක් කනවා. ඒ උයපෙගුතුම රැටත් ගන්න, ඒ කියන්නේ චුට්ටි චුට්ට මෙන් කරනවා. ඊට පස්සේ කිරිපිටි නැහැනේ කොහොමද ලංකාවේ තියෙන ඔක්කොම දින ප්‍රශ්නයන්නේ. ඒ පැත්තේ දරුණු ලෙස එක දරුණු ලෙස එක තියෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ගෑස් නැති වුණාම සෑහෙන ප්‍රශ්න වෙලා තින් දැන් දරලිප් පාවිච්චි කරනවා. ඊට පස්සේ අර අලුත්ම ගැජට් එකක් ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. අර ඉස්සර කාලේ වගේ මේ උල්කටු වල අඟුරු වලින් පොඩි මේ ලිපක් ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. ඒක කරන්ට් එකට ගාලා ඒක මෙහෙම කරනවා. දෙයියනේ කියලා මේ දවස් ටික කරන්ට් ගියේ නැහැ ෆ්ලැට්ස් වලට. ෆ්ලැට්ස් වලට ගියොත් වතුර නැති වෙනවා. මොකද මෝටරේ එන්නේ වතුර ගන්න ඕනේ. වතුර නැති වෙනවා. ෆ්ලැට් මේ ලිෆ්ට් එකට කරන්නේ. ඒ ප්‍රශ්න තමයි මේ දවස් ටිකේ කොලිම්පීඩ ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් එක කියන්නේ මට ඕනලා තිබ්බේ මොකක්ද මිනිසුන්ට සම්පූර්ණ දෙයක් කරන්න. දැන් එතකොට අපිට හැමේලේම මේ කෙනාට කෙනෙක් ආව කියලා උදව් කරන්න බෑ. උදව් ගන්න බෑ. ඒ අඳුරන කට්ටියට කියලා මේ ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා කියලා මම අපිම හදාගත්තා. මොකද මම ඒක නම දැම්මේ මම තමයි හැමදේම බලන්නේ. කොලිම්පීඩ ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් එක තමයි 2 days back අපි ගෙවල් 180 ගානකට දුන්නා 5 kg rice. ඊට කලින් දුන්නා මේ දවස් ටිකේම අපි 360කට දීලා තියෙනවා මේ ෆ්ලැට්ස් වලට. අපිට පුළුවන් විදියට ෆන්ඩ්ස් කරලා දෙන යුරෝ මිනිස්සුත් අපිට ගොඩක් උදව් කරනවා. ඒ අරහා තමයි අපි ඒව කරන්නේ. ගෙවල් 50කට ඉලෙක්ට්‍රිසිටි බිල් ගෙවුවා. අපිට පුළුවන් විදියට. අපිට එතන යන ලොකුට අපිට කරන්න බෑ. ඉන්න මිනිස්සුත් එක්ක අපිට සල්ලි ගන්න බෑ. ඒ නිසා එළියෙන් එන සල්ලි වලින් තමයි ෆන්ඩ්ස් වලින් තමයි අපි ඒව ටික කරන්නේ. ඉස්සෙල්ලාම ප්‍රශ්නේ ඉන්නේ ෆුඩ්ස්, දෙවෙනි ප්‍රශ්නේ ඉන්නේ ගෑස්. ඒකට උත්තරයක් නැහැ කාටවත්. තුන්වෙනි එක ගොඩක් කට්ටිය ප්‍රෙෂර් වෙලා ඉන්නේ ඇන්සයිටි ඇන්ඩ් ડિප්‍රෙෂන්. තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නත් එක්ක ගෙවල් වල ප්‍රශ්න ඇති වෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ තුන තමයි ගොඩක්ම දැනට දැන් තියෙන සිටුේෂන් එකත් එක්ක ගොඩක්ම ප්‍රශ්න තියෙන්නේ කෑම. ඊට අමතරව බලන්න ඕනේ දැන් අපි තව සති දෙකකින් විතර මොන දෙන්න ලෑස්තිලා තියෙනවා ෆන්ඩ්ස් ටික එකතු කරගෙන. මොකද සති දෙකකින් මොනවා වෙයිද දන්නේ නැහනේ. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා අපි ඒකටත් මොන දෙන්න දැම්ම ලෑස්තිලා ඉන්නවා. කරන්න පුළුවන් හැමදේම අපි මේ මිනිසුන් වෙනුවෙන් කරනවා. ඉස්සරහට ඒ ෆ්ලැට්ස් වල විතරක් නෙමෙයි කොළඹ වටේ තියෙන සීලම ෆ්ලැට් සඳහා අපි පුළුවන් විදියට උපකාරතා යොමු කරන්න තමයි අපේ අයිඩියාස් තියෙන්නේ.
So if anyone here would like to help out in any of the high rises, you can speak to Colin. You can speak to me, and I'm happy to pass on the contact details. But Colin would be the best person to speak to because, like he said, the needs are very varied, and the numbers are very high. So, for example, 1 lakh may be used differently to 1 million. So you get the idea, right? They're working with thousands of families. So depending on your capacity and your interest, I think it's best to have a conversation directly with him and see what best or how best to go about it. Because we can definitely vouch for the work that they do in the community. We've worked with them for a long time. And they have the capacity to carry out the work. So if anyone is interested, you could please support Colin Peter Foundation and his community. I guess we can. Okay, so that's a wrap of the 4th teach out of the series. There are more happening, which is really great. So there are others who have now started doing teach outs, which is fantastic. So we encourage you to keep a watch of Twitter and other spaces for those as well.
Thank you so much to our speakers. Usually we keep it for an hour, but we thought, you know, this is going to be a special one. So we're here for 1.5 hours. Just thank you for making the time to come to this very public space to talk about urban development and rights to our city. Thank you to Hashtag for live streaming. The recording will be available on all their platforms. Thank you, Hasna, for the interpretation. Miza for whisper translation, whisper interpretation. And the teachers are here. So, we encourage you to do more teach outs in your own spaces on the sides of protests. We want to take some of these topics to golf face as well. So if anyone wants to volunteer to organize those, that would be great. We're always looking for suggestions of more speakers, also more people who can do this by yourself. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you.